It has started. All right, and next page. Okay, so topics we'll cover today. Again, we're in week 2, so equity engagement, really centering that community voice, making sure we have who we need at the table to make sure that all of the planning, all of the engagement, it really impacts the whole community. And as I promised from last time, we are going to chat about the call to action. So we are going to start with a breakout room to get things started today. And remember that call to action from last week, there was 2 parts to it. First was to review your community safe routes to school plan or other transportation policy plan. Just really getting that feel of the landscape, what efforts have taken place in your community, or where are those gaps. And then secondly, there was the ask to identify 1 to 2 stakeholders in your community and send that introductory email for them to either reconnect or connect that has been on your to-do list but you haven't gotten to. We also understand that life's busy and maybe you didn't get to this. And if you're in a breakout room and you're that person, please share who you would have hoped to get to or what plan that you're interested in looking at some point. So as we do that, we're going to go into breakout rooms for a few minutes, get to meet somebody. I see some folks are joining too, so welcome. Hi, Anne. Hi, Emma. Kelly, if you want to share the breakout rooms, and then we'll come back and chat a little bit more after that. We did figure it out from last time. I know we had problems last week, but we figured it out. We too can learn.
I'm not sure if it'll move us too, Sophie. I just did the auto assign.
I always have issues getting into the breakout rooms on here. What am I supposed to press?
It should have given you a prompt. Let me see if I can add you. Am I not seeing you here?
So I could try leaving and coming back. I've done that once before.
Weird. Hold on, let me try one more thing. No, that's not right. Unsigned. Yeah, it's not giving me the option to move. But maybe since folks are kind of coming in, we can just do a little group ourselves. Yeah. So Brittany, did you have time to look at a plan or even learn about any plans that were in your area?
Yeah, so I actually went on the visualization tool, and in Wilmer we had Roosevelt Kennedy Elementary safe routes to school plans that were updated last, at least on there it said 2013. Okay. So I was able to look through those, and then I did reach out to a contact from the Wilmer schools who would be involved with safe routes to school, and then our Mid-Minnesota regional development planner to see if he'd be able to work with us to update those plans.
Perfect.
That's amazing.
That's a lot of good connections and momentum. Yeah, and RDCs are such great wealths of information. I know Tony joined and he's also from an RDC, but they have good connections and they have some of that history to pull from. That'd be good. We're in breakout rooms, but those of you joining, we're creating our own breakout room here. And we're just reviewing the quote unquote homework from last week. If you had any time to look at a safe routes to school plan or another, transportation plan policy, and if you identified any stakeholders to reach out to. Seeing George or Taylor. Tony, you write the plan, so I'm not going to ask you. Or Luke, you've done a lot of reviewing of plans. Anyone want to come off mute and just kind of share what they were thinking about? It's okay if you didn't have the homework done. People you thought about reaching out to but didn't have the time to.
Kelly, I do want to say that I after the last week, I did reach out to the TZD coordinator in the Northwest, so that was a good intro. We've got a follow-up meeting scheduled, and I'd like to include Susan on future Safe Route stakeholder groups.
Yeah, and she's doing
So
really great, innovative stuff with youth up there. So perfect. Yeah. George, Taylor, Luke, anything to add?
Sure. This is Luke. Sorry, I got kicked out. Like when you assigned me to breakout room 2, it like kicked me out of Teams altogether. So
Oh, no.
my
Weird.
apologies. But anyhow, yeah, I mean all of our plans, with the exception of one, are old. They're from like 2012 or 2013. So with the exception of Jackson, that did an update in 2021. One thing that I found interesting over the years with doing this is, the schools have an interest to, update their plan, but they they're worried about referendums and adding on to the school, or maybe building a new school. There's a lot of interest with building new sporting complexes. So they'd rather wait until that happens before, updating the plan, right? Like through a MnDOT planning assistance grant, for
Sure.
example. So those would be my barriers. It's not that they're not interested. It's just, it's all about referendums down here lately.
Yeah.
So
Competing priorities are always a challenge, and we can maybe talk through some strategies how to reignite those partners.
Yeah.
Cool. Do you want me to close the breakout room, Sophie, or?
Sure, only because we have a jam-packed schedule.
Well, thanks for chatting, folks. I'm going to get these closed and we'll let people kind of join back in, and we'll get to our equity engagement slides.
Family vacation. So,
Yeah.
Welcome back, everyone.
all right.
I was in mid-sentence.
Sorry, Anne.
That's all right.
Everyone gets to find out about my family vacation.
Alrighty, I think everyone is back. Thanks for chatting. I see a few more faces on the screen, so hopefully that kind of ignited some conversations for today. Alrighty, so again, today we're going to chat about equity and engagement. Kelly is going to drop a quick chat or a quick question in the chat to kind of have this conversation be iterative as we go through these slides. The question is, when you think of equity, what does this look like in your community? You can think about that as we go through some of these slides. There is a video that we are going to send at the end of the conversation today. It is from the National Safe Routes Partnership, and it's really this overarching conversation of moving towards mobility justice. It's a really great wrap up of the conversations. So we'll send you that link. Kelly will also drop it in the chat. Okay, we're going to start with some data to really ground us in what we're talking about. Again, equity has several definitions. Depending on who you're talking to, there is a wide range. For today, we are going to talk about safe routes to school and equity. And there are some very specific factors that we think through when we're talking about transportation equity. So the first one is understanding differences in access by income. As you can see in these two slides, access for all Americans by race. It is higher in Latino and African American, both for all Americans and specifically in the low income Americans, which is one of the equity factors that we think through in safe routes. Another kind of slide. Yes, are you not able to see the big screen, folks? You're only seeing a small screen?
I'm able to see the big screen.
Okay. Yes, Rose, we'll send you the slides as well afterwards. Hopefully that'll be helpful. Another specific example data-wise is understanding it safety by race. So children who are African American and Latino are more likely to be killed while walking versus students that are white, which is just a very large discrepancy. Understanding it by income is another factor. So as you can see, children in low income communities are twice as likely to walk and bike to school. So they are more folks on the road that are of these populations that are at higher risk for injury and death. And as you maybe remember, based on our vision is that for all youth in Minnesota to safely, confidently, and comfortably walk and bike to where they need to go. So when understanding those differences in those three factors by income, it is shown that communities with high income have more sidewalks. Communities that are categorized as lower income have more sidewalk gaps. And we can hear that often within when we're doing crossing guards, walking school buses, mapping routes, is there's not even a clear path to get from A to B because there's sidewalk gaps. Also, communities that have street lighting, again, that is more apparent in communities of high income. So just that difference in the wealth. I'm sure you've seen a few of these examples of what we're talking about, but again, we just really want to lay this groundwork. So inequity is the unequal access to opportunity. As you can see in the top left corner, one kiddo gets the apple, the other one says, why is none falling from my tree? Equality is that they get the same. So they both get a ladder. It is the same, but as you can see, the tree is slanted and it's still going to benefit one group or a child than the other. Equity, so it's kind of going clockwise. They're both receiving the apples because they both have ladders, but they're at different heights. So this is customizing tools to identify the inequities within the program. And maybe it isn't equal, it's not the same ladders, but it's different so that they all can have access to it. And then justice is really putting that tree up straight so that they can both have it and having a system that has equal access to both tools and the opportunities. Another more specific one to transportation, equality. They all get a 24-inch bike that they can ride for safe routes to school. And as you can see on the top, the individual in the wheelchair is not going to be able to ride. The second one, way too tall. The third one, it's great. And the smaller guy, way too big. So the equity approach to this is having adaptive bike, a larger bike, a regular size for that kiddo that works, and then that smaller strider size for the little one. Last kind of graphic, sometimes it's helpful to see it in various ways, is this one from Robert Wood Foundation. And I'm actually going to ask you all to come off mute or put in the chat. What do you see the differences here from the equality to the equity standpoint within equitable infrastructure building?
I can come off mute and get us started. There's the audible pedestrian warning for those who might be low vision. They can hear it to know when to cross.
Yeah, this is Ann. I was just going to say, both of these words are really, really important, but they're both very, very different. Because here you have a nice ramp for the wheelchair to get down. And I think we need to get our lens around more equity where, you know, people get what they need, because we're all different and have different needs.
Absolutely. Thank you, Anne. Anyone else see anything?
I see a ramp to let people on wheels get down to the, looks like the street level from this raised sidewalk level.
Yeah.
The textured ramp as well.
Yep.
I put this in the chat. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, yeah,
sorry.
go. Nope, go ahead.
Okay, I put this in the chat, but also I think the second photo is actually safer for everybody. I don't know about anybody else, but I've definitely twisted my ankle coming off of a sharp curb, and for no reason, I have no excuse. But it's just a little safer for even the people who might not technically quote unquote like need it.
Yeah.
And Kelly touched on the audio, but the visual signs there too are real important, where the one on the left has no guidance.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Thanks, everyone. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Kelly to go through the next few slides.
Perfect, thanks. So I think, building into this, I just want to say equity starting out, it might be uncomfortable to talk about. You might not feel that is your strongest knowledge suit, and that's okay. Lean into that discomfort because that's how we grow. You're not supposed to know everything. As we're talking about equity or engagement, it is about learning from your partners and community members. So I just want to talk a little bit about how we at MnDOT through the Minnesota Safe Routes to School program are trying to walk the talk around equity as well. We were one of the first states to add equity as one of our E's in our strategy about 10 years ago. And then in our strategic plan, which we wrapped a few years ago, was the first time that we fully defined equity and priority populations in that guide. A third of our strategies are equity-based strategies. Thinking about our vision statement, we added in the "and in daily life" to better address our rural and small communities. Next slide. So when we're thinking about equity and safe routes, it isn't like we have an equity strategy. It is woven throughout each of the other E's. So an equity strategy in education might be having adaptive bikes, so students with disabilities are able to participate. Equity engagement might be using a translator to talk with parents who might speak another language or be more comfortable communicating in another language. Engineering and equity might be prioritizing a key connection between a mobile home park and the school, that there might not be sidewalks versus other neighborhoods that might have more resources. So again, equity is not a standalone strategy. It is connected with another strategy to make sure we're reaching priority populations. And when we're making it better for some, we're not making it worse for others. Next slide. So I'm just pointing this out that when we talk about equity more, people also talk about equity more and build it into their work. So this is an example of the first time we started incorporating equity into our Safe Routes to School network calls. When we saw our participants from year to year, we added an equity conversation into every webinar each month, and we can see that folks are starting to learn how equity applies to their work and how maybe we don't think we have a lot of people of color in our work, but understanding what those racial disparities might be across the state and how to partner and work with them to make safe routes. The next slide, I believe, is we did an equity survey when we were developing some of our equity tools about 3 years ago. And I just wanted to call out, this is the results from that survey. But again, looking at all these different ways that we can break down or think about equity in our community, that it isn't always just people of color. We're thinking about families of low wealth. We're thinking about single parent households. We're thinking about students in foster care, or students who are unhoused or highly mobile. Maybe, just the rural nature of it. And that's going to provide some equity needs that are different than other communities. So again, thinking about your community and where you might have to do some additional work or more targeted work. The next slide talks about some of the challenges when we're trying to do this work with equity. And I just wanted to show them that this work is hard. There are challenges with this work. If it were easy, it'd already be done, right? Language barriers and translation, that's the baseline. That is a great thing to do. It is a starting point with equity, but understanding some of the other barriers. If you're a population that's experienced a lot of disparities and might have some distrust with government, holding an open house in City Hall might not be the best approach. Maybe doing it in a park or at the school might feel more comfortable for folks, as an example. And our next slide talks about our equity in planning guide that we have created in partnership with our many local partners and planners. It might be something to take a good look through. It'll help you think about equity in planning or equity in safe routes if you want a more holistic look. And the next slide, I believe, also talks about our equity scorecard. Oh, go back, I'll throw it in the chat box as well. We don't have a visual of it, but it's the equity scorecard And we'll talk about this more, but it's a great thing to kind of work on after these sessions. And what it does is take one of the communities you're working with and just you go through it step by step and start to think through what equity would look like in the community, what it would look like with this work, and who are the partners that you would need to do. So nice methodical one. Many Safe Routes communities will do the equity scorecard during a Safe Routes to School committee or their school wellness committee to help ground people in what equity looks like in this work, as some people, like we were saying at the top, might not be as comfortable with both of the terminology and what that looks like in the community. So it can help ground everybody when we're talking about equity and what that means. And then the next one is our STEP score. This was something that we created also 4 or 5 years ago. And what we learned from grant writing is that it's really hard to score equity. What looks good in an application for equity, it's not apples to apples. So we wanted to do some quantitative measures around equity. So some percentages where we can more easily align points and it's standardized, while also having a qualitative question where those who might score not as high in the STEP score have the opportunity to provide a narrative that's going to share the unique barrier that still has equity to it. So it might be a school or school district that scores low on the STEP score, but the project they're working on is a high equity project connecting a mobile home park trailer court with the school. That's a targeted population, and that is a very key equity engineering strategy. And so what we learned from when we started doing this STEP score, you can see the blue is low STEP score and green is high STEP score. So when we looked at past funding to current funding, we were able to lift up more of those high need applications because we understand the communities that have high needs might not have the resources to submit a good grant application. They might not have time, they might not have experience, they might not have partners to review. And so we don't always want to score applications negatively when there is a strong need there. And so wordsmithing shouldn't be the only way we score these. All right, next slide. So we're going to talk more about this in a few weeks, but equity in our work and in grant making, if you are working on, okay, I have 4 school districts, who do I partner with? Thinking about those communities with the most inequities could be helpful. They might need more people power to help walk them through the process than a school that might have some more high needs. And also, those schools that have more resources, more parent volunteers, and more support, they also might be the ones who are the loudest and emailing and calling you more frequently. And so you do want to respond to those, but you also want to be responding to the voices that aren't being lifted up because they don't feel like they have the power or the connections or the time to engage in these type of decisions. I'll let you go on. Back to you, Sophie.
Thanks, Kelly. So laying that groundwork, all of the background structural items of what we've done, it's like, so what does that look like in practice? That's great, Kelly, that you have a equation for when you do grant making, but I don't know what that looks like in my community. So we're going to walk through some slides of how it looks. So the first is, you may have heard of this day, maybe you have not. It's Ruby Bridges Day, which is November 14th. So in 1960, a 6-year-old girl walked to school and became a national icon in the civil rights movement. In California, a school community youth identified this as a priority to make a walk day around this. They brought it to their legislation. They created a big thing about it, and now it's became a national movement. So it's on November 14th. We also acknowledge that we already have 3 walk to school days in Minnesota. Lucky us, we have winter walk to school day that most states don't have, but we have the great winter season here. So this might not be an additional one for your elementary schools, but what we've learned, and we've had 2 districts in the state, Richfield and Rochester, work on this last year. It's a really great event if you want to start engaging middle school and high school students. You can link it to civics, you can link it to history. If there's activism clubs, our youth are energized, and this might be a really great way to connect some of that learning that they learned in elementary school with more of that middle school, high school So we'll drop some links. If your community is interested in this right now at the national level, there is a mini grant to support the implementation of this day. And if you go that route, send Kelly, myself, and Phoebe a note, and we're happy to help support that implementation as well. Another example is refurbished bike distribution. Police may have recovered bikes, they have been in storage. Free Bikes for Kids does this. There's bike mechanic classes in the school. I've also recently have learned like Community Ed is teaching bike mechanic class both for school population, but also for that greater community population. So if a kiddo does have a bike and it breaks, then somebody in that community can help making sure that it's back on the road. This is a really great example too of refurbished bikes. For a rural population setting, might not be as many bike shops, or getting to the bike shop might be a problem or a barrier. So being able to know how to refurbish bikes keeps those kiddos on the, I want to say road, but that doesn't seem safe. Keeps the kiddos on the path. Another example of equitable activities, Minneapolis Public Schools developed a street harassment guide. This was identified by students, put into their Safe Routes to School plan so that they had that district support for it. It was in development with school staff, but specifically youth, telling them, I don't feel safe here, let's try this out. This campaign's not going to resonate with us, and so forth. They received funding from MnDOT, Safe Routes to School boost grants for this, and is implemented within their district curriculum, that students receive this street harassment guide. So another just great example. Other equity programming, St. Paul has a high school bike shop that services the fleet of their district and repairs low-income communities. Richfield and many other districts across the state have starter bike fleets, and that really addresses the smaller kids that maybe aren't that 3rd to 4th grade, to get them on bikes, to learn the basic riding skills so that when they're in those 3rd and 4th and 5th grade classes, they can do more of the off-campus bike rides. So closing that gap. Rochester does walking school buses from subsidized apartment complexes. We're going to get to an example of specifically rural, as I know in the last week there was a call out of, can you please provide way more examples for rural? So we're going to try that this session. And going forward. And then bike fleets, we are seeing that if somebody submits a grant for bicycle fleet, adaptive bikes are in that, but we're also seeing an increase of just adaptive bike fleets in general as well, which is great. And then the SAIL program is an alternative learning school, and they have a really great example of how they've implemented biking into students' IEPs to support behavioral support. And we'll send a link to that webinar. They were on a network call a few months ago outlining that, but it's a really great example. And now in rural examples. So SAIL program, again, story stroll in multiple languages. So again, if we're not encouraging the to and from school, knowing that it's rural, there's consolidated school districts, there's distances to drive. What can we do at school that still encourages safe routes to school? And one of those is a story stroll. So you can put like yard signs with the storybooks along the school track, in the field, in multiple languages, and then being able to have those kiddos read and walk during the school day is a really great example for rural. Access to bikes, there's many programs, bike fleets, earn a bike, bike maintenance classes, walk bike fun curriculum, preaching to the choir here, you all know those. And then unique rural barriers, because we know there's a lot of great, but we also can meet up with barriers. So railroad crossings is a thing. And how do we address that? How do we work with the would it be the business, Kelly? Railroad?
Yeah, railroad authorities, city
authority, that's the right word.
Yeah.
Semi-traffic and farm equipment. Some of these schools are on way fast highways, and then they got these farm equipment we have to pass. Consolidated schools, thinking about distance to school. Some of these kids will never be able to walk and bike because it's 15 miles to school. And then mobile home communities, which has both a barrier but also a really great potential from a consolidated school community, and how can we get those kiddos all to school together. All right, a couple other integrations, kind of that baseline, what can we do? So translation and ADA compliance, this is baseline. When we create something, can we create it in both English and the main languages, either in your school community? At the state level, we have it at the top 4 or 5 languages across the state. If there's anything that you need that is not translated, reach out to us and we can get that translated. So just know that. Encouragement events. So those materials, again, that translation, but also we've here that time is that biggest barrier for engagement. So thinking about those priority populations, and we want to do an engagement event, but we haven't heard back from anybody of where do we go, who can sit at the table and help. Maybe that's something we can do. Maybe from a public health lens or public health department, RDC, healthcare partners, maybe we can find senior volunteers, PTO to come help at those events because they want it, they just don't have that time as that barrier. So thinking through that. Another key integration for equity is universal access to key trainings. So having the trainings be free for everybody. So 2 examples on here is a AAA school safety patrol training. Walk Bike Fun is free and accessible to everyone. What we've also learned is having it asynchronous, knowing that in schools that are defined as higher priority populations, those teachers are being pulled multiple directions. So them being able to take the trainings at their time, they know how to do the work, right? So being able to have them do it when they can to implement it makes it accessible for everybody. Okay, I know I just went through a lot. This is only halfway through all the great conversations today. So we're gonna, Kelly and I kind of brainstorm some of the lessons learned when we've learned about equity, but Kelly's also gonna put in the chat, we wanna hear from you. What have you learned when you've tried to, or when you work to implement equity and work through an equity lens? So things we've learned, equity is challenging work and allowing for space for self-care. You may get burnt out, you may get frustrated. You may question, why are we doing this work? Why doesn't anyone else think this way? So allowing your time, allowing space to be able to step back, come back in, and so forth. Creating a shared definition of what equity looks like is really helpful because people have different definitions of that, right? And if we're working on 2 definitions, it may cause some chaos. Using data-driven decision-making, the specific with the grant making, being able to justify why you made that choice. Supporting communities and understanding why they're implementing equity. Why does this matter? Again, it may, that word equity may set up some flags, but really thinking through, not saying equity, but saying, let's talk through this mobile home park in this community. How can we get these kids to school? Let's talk about the single mom that is trying to get the kids to pick up and drop off. And could we implement walking school buses to support the transportation options? So bringing it back to that people-centered focus of how can we support our communities? The feedback loop. So when we engage with these priority populations, so is everybody else, right? So we should be able to, we should go back to them and say, we heard what you said, here's what's going forward. Here are those next steps. Do you want to be engaged in the next steps? Do you want to just be notified? And you can see the others. I'm excited to pull up the chat. Phoebe, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say one thing I've learned here and at past positions that involved equity is that people aren't stupid. Like I mean, everyone knows this, but it's always a thing I try to keep front of mind is like they might not know the word equity in the sense that we use equity because it's kind of it can be kind of an in-house word. It can be a little jargony in comparison to how it's understood by the broader population. But people know what they need often, and they know they're very resourceful. People are generally resourceful and intelligent, and tapping into that local intelligence and local understanding of like the routes to school or what, where the food deserts are. People do know that. And so leaning into that, it saves you a lot of time and effort, honestly. And it also makes people feel respected and listened to because people who have been disadvantaged, and speaking as someone who grew up in a poor household, are very, very attuned to when someone is condescending to them. And I'm not saying anyone here ever would, but that was something I had to be conscious of when I worked in a rural setting, for example, as someone grew up in the city, is like not calibrating my tone to something that would come off as like I was talking down to them. So that's my primary insight.
Thank you. Anyone else has any key lessons learned?
I think one of the things we're thinking about this year is a few years back, we had done a safe routes plan for the community of Nadawash, and we didn't incorporate any Ojibwe language into that plan. And we have a plan this year for Red Lake, and we know that their native culture is very important. So we're trying to find ways to bring that into this plan, but we also don't want to force it. So we want it to happen naturally. So you know, we haven't figured it out yet, but our plan, how we're going to approach that, I think it's going to be really important that we acknowledge it and we incorporate it into the plan.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Tony. Luke?
Yeah, I was gonna say with our plans, none of this are really involved with the creation of the plans, so we have to rely on outside committees to come up with the, the different goals, and those goals have the equity portion, right? So that's more of an observation that I just thought of now. So the
That's
schools
great.
are rarely at the meetings, so it kind of falls on the committee, like an active living committee or
Mm-hmm.
a trails committee to come up with the language around it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Anyone else? All right, well, if you think of any more, please put them in the chat. We are going to continue on. Okay, now we're going to talk about engagement. So for Minnesota Safe Routes to School, we define as engagement in our Safe Routes to School plan, strategic plan, as listening to children, families, school staff, and community partners to build creative, equitable, and meaningful engagement opportunities into the program structure. So why equity and engagement matter in Safe Routes to School? The authentic engagement helps ensure that we're designing programs and infrastructure that actually reflect what people need, not just what we think they need. But going back to your point, Luke, making sure that people are in that team that also bring that lens from the school perspective instead of just the outside folks saying, I think we need this. I think this is the route we go to school, is helpful. Equity is critical because we know that the barriers to walking in school aren't experienced equally. Based on this priority populations, income, students of color, students with disabilities specifically, face greater risks and have potentially fewer infrastructure supports. So really having this authentic community engagement helps elevate those experiences and being able for us to document in our plan what's that best solution going forward. Okay, so in engagement, Kelly and I try to kind of brain dump in categories of like, how do we talk about this? So one thing is choosing the right space. Both formal and informal spaces have value. Both formal and informal types of engagement have value as well. So for formal parent caregiver surveys, as you know, this is a key data collection tool that takes place fall and spring, or at least maybe it's just fall. Student tallies are fall and spring. That we ask folks to do, right? You gather data of all these things about safe routes to school. Focus groups with priority populations is a really, really great formal way to get data from stories. Again, open houses, reviewing safe routes to school plans, another really great way. But this may create barriers and folks may not attend certain formal engagement sessions based on either past relationship, past harms with certain organizations. The current political climate may create barriers for engagement. So formal is great, but also informal is really great. And sometimes that's where you get the best responses, the best stories, and the impact that we can take home. So some examples of what we've done and heard is talking to families and pickup lines. If they have to sit there for 45 minutes, might as well chat with us, right? Instead of just scrolling on your phone. Gathering stories from caregivers during walking school bus routes. Let's have a walk and talk. Let's meet with them at the beginning of the walking route and let's talk about this. What are your impacts? What have you heard from other community members of what this program is doing for our community? Dotmocracy at school events. This is a really, really great way to have information, but have it in a passing by way. We've also learned in the rural context, Dotmocracy at libraries is also really great to get more of that community buy-in. And quick phone interviews, photo interviews with kids, point to where you go to school. Point to where that scary dog is on that block that you avoid. Point to where that car is always blocking that intersection so you don't cross there, right? We can get some information and those kiddos live it every day so they can tell us. Second, our next one would be go to where the people are, all right? Don't expect everyone to attend a city meeting or a town hall. Go to parent-teacher conferences, go to arrival and dismissal. This photo here is from homecoming. Community festivals, farmers markets, cultural community events, and make sure you show up with a clear ask. What are we asking here? Is there a tool to give back? Do we have a question we want them to answer? Is there a bigger purpose of why we're there? Or is it really just to start building that collaboration and trust? Just knowing why you're there. It's like I did these slides and knew that trust was going to be the next conversation. Building trust with the authentic engagement. So these are key principles of how we can build that authentic trust, but knowing that lots of our organizations have policies that create barriers and they're not up to the time of how we know now what is equitable approaches to programming. So we will call that out right now, but this is best case scenario, what we should try for when we do engagement. So offering food, offering childcare options, offering interpreters, and flexible timing. If it's going to be from a 9 to 5, some folks can't get there in time. Can we have one in the morning? Can we have one during the day? And can we have one in the evening to make sure that everybody's voices? Providing gift cards for participation. This is a really hard one through the Boost grant, through our program, but some can do it. And we continue to strive for how can we give payment for these people's times because it is valuable. Asking communities how they want to be involved, not just when. Do you want us to come to your parent-teacher conference? Would you like us to come to your homecoming better instead of saying, we're going to show up here, we're going to have a table, which won't go very well probably. Hosting in partnership with groups that they trust, right? If there's a community lead that they really trust and have partnership and history with, maybe they co-lead it with you. Maybe it's not just somebody from, we'll speak from our perspective, the government coming in and asking questions, but instead it's somebody from that community leading that conversation. While you're doing that, we should also be thinking about where are those barriers, and you could reflect on saying, who's not being here and who's not showing up? What voices? We have a lot here, but there might be some missing. And that's where we could go back to that equity scorecard and say, this population was here, but we haven't heard from this one. How can we get to this group? And it might be transportation. There was no way to get there. Work schedules, limited English, digital accessibility if it's virtually, again, and otherwise, is there historical components that we need to be aware of? One thing that we really value, obviously, we talk about youth and safe routes, is how do we engage the youth? How can we continue to get youth voice into our programs, into our planning, and talk to the kids who are biking now? They know it. It might be from a student safety patrol, student council, green team or bike club, middle school and high school, either art or PE classes. And maybe the kid that's down your block that bikes every day and you're saying, oh, it's 8:10, here he goes down the street, right? And then thinking through, what is that data not telling us? What we know is, as planners, we often use crash data, right? This intersection is unsafe because there's X amount of crashes here at this speed. But we know is if a kid gets hit by a car and if they're not injured, they're not going to report it. They're going to say, oh, I was in the wrong. The adult was in the right. I'm going to go to school. So sometimes that data doesn't show us where these kids are more at risk for getting injured. We've also heard things like, no one shovels a sidewalk in the winter. I'm not walking this route. It's all ice. I don't need to skate to school. I mean, maybe we could. That could be a theme for winter walk to school day, is also skating to school, but I digress. The corner always smells like smoke. There's a really scary dog at this intersection. I don't like walking here. This light is broken, so we have to wait 5 more minutes, so we go down 2 more blocks. The kids have these safety perceptions, and maybe we mark them as safe, right? But if they perceive it as unsafe, they're not going to participate. So how can we get their voices in because they know they are experts of their routes? And some other strategies other than just surveys. Some of us really love a good survey, and surveys serve a purpose, but also there's other ways we can do this. And it's not just a checkbox, but remember, it's that relationship building. Can you connect in Dotmocracy? Can we have walking meetings? Can we have a story event where parents come and tell stories? Can we connect over food? How do we leverage student clubs to promote a campaign? Can they make the signs for it? How would they illustrate pictures of a safe community, right? It would be starting to have these conversations and shifting the power from us knowing to them really knowing all of this. Back to Phoebe's comment of these communities know what they have and know the barriers addressed for other things. All right, and then coming back to planning and evaluation, knowing that most of us on this call are also in the planning and evaluation realm. But if you use authentic community engagement, it's going to help prioritize where to improve infrastructure, not just what, but where. It's going to, again, have that lived experience, not just those crash datas. It could help inform campaigns, support evaluation, but also incorporating that feedback loop. We came to this session, we heard this, it's in this plan, and here's that next stage. We're going to apply to X grant to try to get this, are just a few of them. Again, that loop. They want to see how their input's been used, right? It could be as low touch as putting it in the newsletter, the school newsletter, saying, we heard you, we're going to do X. It could say, you told us winter walking is hard. Here's a campaign. We're going to put flyers on all the houses that are in the walk zone, telling them, please shovel your driveway after the snowfall. You're in the walk zone. It could be translating, again, those updates to home language. This should be the baseline. We should be doing this, but sometimes the should needs a little help too. Okay. Again, backing to what are some examples then of rural engagement? How do we do authentic rural engagement? What have we learned with consolidated school districts? They're in various communities. Also, Kelly, were you going to take this one or do you want me to take it?
Sure, I can jump in.
Great.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have a sip of coffee. Kelly, you can take it.
Rural engagement, thinking about a consolidated school district, so just having one Safe Routes to School committee or one event, you might not be understanding the needs in all the different communities, whether schools are in those different communities or they pool students from those communities. So definitely, think about that. And also think those communities have different priority populations throughout them. So that equity scorecard you might have to do for each of the communities or the student population at those different schools. And thinking about those different city partners or school partners that you can partner with for engagement, there already might be engagement going on. Can you tack on a couple questions to something that's happening? We hear a lot about survey fatigue, so thinking about combining those with other efforts that are going on. Again, thinking about where folks are. So again, mobile home parks in greater Minnesota are more common, and that might be an area of dense population and priority populations to be working with. I live in greater Minnesota, like our county fair, our city festival, whatever it is, Cheese Fest in Pine Island or whatever. those are events that a lot of people roll out for. So is that a place where you could do some engagement that you're connecting with the student populations, but maybe the neighborhood near the school? Really active PTA, PTOs, thinking about those service organizations, which are very popular in Greater Minnesota, and those folks are probably retired and have some time and capacity to help you. Kiwanis, Rotary, JCs, and go on and on. Lions Club, Eagles, all those kind of things are great partners, might have some funding, might have some volunteers to support the work. And also libraries are a gathering spot in Greater Minnesota where there might not be as many other like businesses or restaurants to visit. That libraries where you could hold some engagement sessions or leave a Dotmocracy exercise up for 2 weeks and see if people can complete it. We've also seen that done at public health. So if you have folks coming in for WIC or in human services, if they're going into, get other services, maybe there's a Dotmocracy exercise there. We're short in time, so I'm gonna throw it back to you, Sophie.
All right. And again, we're gonna ask you to put in the chat as well, what lessons or takeaways have you gained from your engagement events? But a couple kind of just wrapping up what we've just chatted through, going to the places where people are, neutral spaces, being able to incentivize for time, knowledge, energy. The engagement is iterative, right? You might go once, you might have to go back to get more information or share out. A multidisciplinary approach is really helpful. Sometimes in the transportation world, in our world, right, we're talking about transportation and we might not know everything, they might not know everything, but for folks on this call, for example, public health skills, community health assessments, right? You know the data in there. So maybe that's a lens you can bring into this. If you're working with local agencies, you might have another lens. School staff has another lens, and being able to have all these people at the table for the engagement really then makes it a whole. Anyone else have any lessons or takeaways during engagement events? I'm gonna give you 10 more seconds before I go to that slide, in case you do. Okay. Well, you can put it in there if it comes off. So some more resources to explore. If you're like, Sophie, Kelly, this is great, I want to learn more. We are going to send you a list of several webinars you can think through about engaging certain populations. There's some interactive engagement examples that we're going to show you, some mapping, some Dotmocracy. There's also policy campaigns. If it's at a local level and you know what, I want to change this policy, specifically jaywalking, as this identifies certain populations that get more fines for it. So there's a bunch of ways in which you can continue this if you would like. All right, the big group reflection. I know we have 4 more minutes and we have a few more slides. So Kelly, if you want to put it in the chat, and we would love for you to come off mute and share your reflections. Some are key takeaways. There we go. Key takeaway from today's conversation. If you have no key takeaways, you may all have thought, think, ponder, share. What's way you can improve equity in your Safe Routes to School engagement? How will you involve youth in planning or evaluation going forward? And who is missing from your table right now? Give us 2 minutes to chat through this. Robert, I'm going to call on you because you are off video, or you're on video. What are your thoughts?
I think I've noticed that at Plymouth, at least, a lot of our engagement is either at City Hall or it's us sending letters to like individual homes. And I don't think kids are really involved in either of those processes. They're not the ones opening mail, and kids by themselves probably aren't the ones coming to City Hall. So I think getting out in the community, we have plenty of parks in the city to, host a little pop-up event at, or at actual schools. I really like the idea of like going to a homecoming or a football game or something to kind of meet people where they already are going to be instead of inviting them to come to scary City Hall or something.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
Tony?
I think that there's always opportunity for improvement, and I think we need to look back at previous plans and see how we can make small tweaks for changes. I know we had a e-bike promotion where we build some e-bikes up at Red Lake schools, and there was a leadership group. And I'd like to leverage that group for this upcoming Safe Routes to School plan, and I think they could provide some valuable student input. So that's just something I'm thinking about.
Thank you. And Brittany, are you still on? Oh, it looks like she jumped off. She was going to go off mute. And I know we're almost 2 minutes, so I acknowledge if you haven't to run. But we have a few more things. Just something to ponder is if we're not actively working to undo the harms of past injustices, are we perpetrating them? So if we're not engaging in this, if we're not thinking about this, what does that say? Okay, 2 more minutes. We can do this, folks. I want to share a local highlight. So this is OWL Open World Learning, OWL. It's in St. Paul. They have a bike course that is a 1-week course, and it is designed as a exploratory setting where there's basic bike maintenance, cycling culture, bike skills, group rides, navigating the city, how to plan your rides. But they also use the bike fleets for tune-ups and use. So it's supporting that maintenance of all the district bike fleets that have been received. It also increases the access. So if kiddos don't have bikes, they can still engage in this curriculum. And it gives that real world experience for kiddos. Very great story. Super cool work. Okay, last but not least, call to action. Tony, it's a really great example of what we get to do this next week. So first off, we're gonna look through our equity scorecard. We're gonna reflect on what equity looks like in our community, pick one population, one group, one school, one community, and walk through that list, think through it. And then let's review some prior engagement. We do not always have to start fresh. We have done this work. If we've not, our predecessor has done this work. If not, somebody prior to that may have done this work. And often in plans, there's addendums of how this has been, who has been involved, what is that data that has been collected. So that is the ask. We're going to do the equity scorecard and we're going to review prior engagement. There's going to be a few prompts that I'll send in the follow-up email just to think through. And with that, I am very proud it's 11 o'clock and we are done. I'm going to stop recording.